Hi guys, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel and welcome to yet another episode of my weekend drawing session. So in this video I actually have a different microphone, which is very exciting because before, my previous microphone was also good. It was a Blue Yeti microphone that is very popular here on YouTube. But the only problem with this microphone is that so I had to research a lot about microphones lately, just because with microphones, with cameras, I think it's easier, or maybe because I just used to be working with cameras a lot. I've been working as a photographer for a very long time, so cameras don't scare me. Nothing like this scares me, but audio recording is actually something that I have no knowledge about. So this is where I have like gap in my understanding how things work. And with microphones, what shocked me the most is that there are so many types of microphones. I thought it's just a microphone before. Well, I'm being very stupid, because I thought this. It's okay, I guess, to not know, but if you start thinking, of course there should be different types of microphones. If they're used for different purposes, sometimes microphones record all the sounds around you, sometimes microphones record just the sound super close to microphone. It's got to be different type of microphones. But yeah, basically, I don't know, if you guys, you probably know better this stuff than me, but I don't have a musical ear. I never worked with instruments professionally on anything like this. But the thing is with microphones, apparently, is first of all, you have absolutely different types of microphones. And then within those types of microphones, there are different things that those microphones can do. So a microphone that I use on my camera when I'm recording the video is a shotgun omnidirectional super cardioid microphone. You have to learn this weird terminology with microphones because you cannot just go and buy a microphone, or you can just go and look for best microphone. It's not such thing, and the microphone should really serve what are you doing. Well, I didn't know any of this, so but I had to learn. So that is the one that I'm using on my camera. And for voiceovers and all of that, I got Blue Yeti because everybody on the internet was saying that Blue Yeti is really great for anything YouTube, amazing, voiceovers, great, Blue Yeti. And I was like, cool, Blue Yeti, it looks nice, it looks very beautiful, and I got it, and it sounded really, really nice as well. It still sounds really nice. It's really nice quality microphone, and so it really helps you not to record your voice and then listen and be like, oh my god, I don't sound like this, that's terrible. It makes you feel all right with how you sound. But the thing is, what I didn't know, what I know now after excessive research, is that Blue Yeti is a condenser mic, which means that it does record sounds all around it. You can definitely set it up as a I guess cardioid type of thing, is that it records something in front of one side and less on the other type of side, but it still does record stuff around it to some degree, so it picks up a lot of sound around. And which means when you're recording, what I started noticing really easily is that, well, first of all, I always have to close my balcony door or my windows when I'm recording. Then in my computer, sometimes fan goes off because my computer is recording my voice, so my computer is working, and sometimes I like to put a lot of pressure on my computer and make it render something at the same time. So sometimes my fans on my computer go off, and when they do, I have to stop talking because I know I'll be cutting this part out, and then I have to repeat whatever I was talking about when the fans started to go on. And then also the fans that I have, and just overall in my unit, and also my dog, if she walks, I have to stop too. And I also have to be very careful because every time I shake the desk a little bit, it creates you can hear me putting my hand on the, you can hear really my feet moving under the desk. You can feel my elbows on the table, and it's all of that is just, I have to really be sitting really still and be really careful, and my chair does squeak, so I have to really sit in one pose and not move at all while I'm recording, and it still will pick up some sounds. So which doesn't say bad things about the mic itself. It's a good mic, but this is just the the type of the mic it is. And then I started researching more and I was like, well, so what people are using for microphone, for like podcasting? Is there some microphones that like, what do they do? It's like, it's a big open studio. And then I realized there is such thing as dynamic microphones, which actually do pick up the sound only in front of them and in a very close proximity, and they eliminate a lot of background noise. And the sound of the voice is a little different with those microphones. So the sound is more bassy, like has more bass in it and has more richness, and I really do like the sound. So I got different mic for this podcasting, so hopefully I don't have to be freaking out about moving and other different sounds going on. And I also do like how my voice sounded there. It sounds very relaxing. I heard a lot of people, they actually prefer male voices for talking, for voiceover and stuff like this, because they're more relaxing, whereas female are more high pitch. I don't think my voice is high at all, but I do appreciate the fact that it can be very relaxing when the voice is a little lower and there's some bass present. So this is basically a long-winded explanation for why my voice sounds different here. And it sounds different because I have a new microphone. And let me guys know, how do you like it? Also, I wanted to do a quick request. If you do enjoy videos like this, and if you appreciate those podcast type of videos, I would appreciate you if you click a like button. That really helps the channel, and I hope I can provide good content for you, so it's worth it for you to click into this like button. But yeah, so let's go back to the podcast itself. In today's episode, it's going to be a pretty long one. Actually, what's funny, because it's a new mic and I have this new windshield, it smells like plastic, and you have to be really close to the microphone, and because it's so new, fresh out of like the package, it smells like plastic. Yeah. I hope I won't be giggling uncontrollably by the end of this podcast, because I smell too much plastic. So this podcast is actually going to be a pretty long one. It was a very long weekend drawing session, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. But even though it's a very long one, I don't think you will find that I have a lot of progress on this one. Like overall, if you just scroll through it real quick, I barely finishing the page. And sometimes this is the nature of things. Sometimes you spend a lot of time drawing, but it's not necessarily you have something to show. Sometimes you went from having 20% of the page done to 70 or 80% of the page done and nothing like to show. That's why also I like drawing on different pages at the same time, because it feels like progress is happening everywhere. But yeah, this drawing session is pretty long, and I'm finishing, so I'm working on this panel, on the second panel, and I'm very proud of myself of how I was able to draw the face. I find that this particular pose is pretty challenging, where somebody is turned away from you, so it's not like 3/4 towards you, it's 3/4 away from you, so you're exposed to a lot of the back side almost of the chin, and you have back side of the ear, and I find that it's pretty hard to nail it. And the thing is, with those poses, I don't know, it's a whole different discussion. It's like when the poses itself or the angles itself are very daring of the characters, it's harder to show emotions, because the emotions it's harder to read from different angles overall. So it's something that you have to always balance. So if you, for example, want an extreme angle, but you still want to show extreme emotions of the character, you have to keep in mind, so from some angles, some emotions don't look recognizable and really good. So if I'm achieving angle, like if I'm using angle like this, basically when the characters turn away from us to the degree, so it's not like we just see their back, we see some part of their face. Keep in mind that you probably don't want your character have emotions at this moment, because first of all, those emotions are not going to be readable, and second, if you draw those emotions correctly, it's going to distort the face and make it just looking weird. So yeah, this is just something that I've been noticing. But yeah, for this panel, I'm really proud of what I've been doing. Overall, this chapter has been challenging because I will have a lot of characters at the page at any amount of time. And look here, I have 3 people and 2 pigeons. So it's a lot of creatures in the panel. And something that is very important for me is to keep track of all these pigeons, because sometimes they fly off the shoulder, then fly to the shoulder of another character, they change position, fly to send a message, come back, and I have to constantly keep track of them and where they're sitting. So sometimes I have disappearing pigeons or appearing pigeons, so I have to make sure pigeons are accounted for. But Pigeons in the story, as I mentioned in my previous podcast, they're just some messengers basically, and they're able to transmit information in pretty magical kind of way. So they actually first they can teleport, and then they transmit visual information too. So this basically they're like advanced fantasy smartphones type of device. And I like to be very creative with the pigeons that my character have. I have the whole board on Pinterest that is dedicated to me finding as many different types of pigeons as possible, and I want to make my pigeons recognizable. So I want to eventually be, you know, kind of you have a character and then you recognize this character by the way they look, by the way what type of clothes they like to wear, by the way what horse or head-rod in my story they have, and also by the what type of pigeon do they have, like what is the color of that pigeon. So sometimes you see a pigeon arriving, and without anything, you already know what character this pigeon is arriving for, and which means I will be having a lot of pigeons in my story that will have to be very distinct color combinations. And you know, after researching, I realized the pigeons come in so many shapes and colors. Well, basically, if the pigeon is not important, I will draw this pigeon just gray. And but yeah, for my main character, one of my main characters, for Kuroi, for protagonist, I picked up this particular pigeon. I thought it's pretty good choice just because it's clearly very recognizable. It stands out a lot, but at the same time it's very simple. So it's not recognizable because of some complex pattern. It's really recognizable because it's very unusual, just brown and white. It's pretty simple, and you will always recognize this pigeon and you always know whose pigeon it is. And also, which is very interesting, how you can so pigeons, they're animals, right? So they don't emote. So this is kind of a challenge, but also pretty fun thing too, because the pigeons, they obviously talk, they interact with character, and especially this pigeon. They don't necessarily have names. I mean, they have names, but their names are not words. So I cannot say, oh, this pigeon Josh and this pigeon Jennifer, just because they don't really have names like that. They have visual names that you have to imagine, to kind of like imagine an object, to imagine something to call them. But let's call this pigeon that I'm talking, this brown and white one, Elmil, because in the end he will get the name. Like this pigeon will get a name. Pigeon will have this very special honor of getting a name. But so basically with Elmil, because he is talking a lot back to Kuroi, so this pigeon has quite a lot of personality. Actually, pigeons normally don't have personality. They're more like very neutral. They don't have their own identity, but this particular pigeon does have it. So it's very interesting because he interacts with Kuroi quite a lot, and it's kind of, he creates like a character foil for Kuroi a little bit, because Kuroi doesn't talk as much. Like, I mean, he doesn't not just talk as much, he also doesn't reveal a lot of information about himself to the reader. That's why having a pigeon around that can, for example, ask an interesting question, that even by the fact if Kuroi chooses not to reply, or we see some emotional hint on Kuroi's face, it will already help us to make it a little bit, you know, interesting, and also help us to tell more about the character and about the character motivations in the scene. So Elmil, obviously, he is a pigeon, so he is not able to emote, but I try to show his attitude with his poses, where he's looking at, and kind of him being stressed and him being not stressed, kind of all of those things, and kind of like about his body language. This is what I'm trying to do when I'm creating this pigeon's reactions. But overall, this pigeon is actually a big part of the story. Overall, pigeons are a very big part of the story. I don't know if you guys here who are reading my comic, I don't know, let me know if you're reading my comic. But my comic is called, actually it's funny, maybe I should tell my comic is called. Finally, on the episode, I don't know, 4 of my podcast, I need to tell what my comic is called. So my comic is called The Book of Contradictions. I call it TBOC for short, or I call it book, because this is how you pronounce abbreviations in Russia. You just read them phonetically, basically. But it's weird. But basically, it's called The Book of Contradictions. And originally, when I was planning it as a novel, it has 3 arcs, 3 parts, basically 3 books, because everything was a trilogy back then when I was creating. But I think just overall, the 3 kind of arcs and 3 stories that make one story are very important. Kind of each one ask a different question about the world, and in the end you have a complete story. But anyway, I digress. This is 3 arcs in the story, and kind of like 3 huge volumes of the comic. And the first volume is actually called Pigeon, And first is called Pigeon, next one is called Ziln, and another one is called Snow. And I know it might make absolutely zero sense to you right now why I choose those three absolutely random words, in which one is imaginary, to call the arcs and like the parts of my story, but it all will make sense, I promise. So Pigeon is so important, like pigeons are so important to my story, that it's actually the first arc of the story is called Pigeon. Great honor for pigeons. So that's why this pigeon is important. So basically Elmil and his story is that, well, as I said before, pigeons are really don't have personality on like as they are. They just transmit information, and they just creatures that just swim in this information. And that's why they work with Silanians, because this is how they get the information. So it's kind of weird. They're not that self-aware about themselves. But this pigeon that Kuroi has, Ilmil, this pigeon is clearly showing some signs of self-awareness, and he clearly have some questions about himself, pigeons overall, Silanians. He does throughout the story do like makes proactive choices where pigeons usually don't do. They don't have like businesses of their own. They don't do things because they personally desire to do them. They act as Silanians tell them. They transmit stories that Silanians tell them to transmit. They basically connect Silanians when Silanians ask them to, but at the same time they never usually, I mean, it's not like they have free will. They do, they just don't care to use it. They really just go with the complete flow. But this pigeon that Kuroi has, he seems to be aware about this is how pigeons are, but at the same time he notices, like this pigeon notices himself that he does have something different. He's interested in certain things. He sometimes will actually do a proactive thing. He will actually do something because acting on his own will and idea. So but it's something that will be developing through the whole part, to the whole volume, and through the whole, first like 25 chapters of the story. So that's kind of, but yeah, so this pigeon is really shows and interacts with, it really interacts with Kuroi, and it's just interesting to try to show emotions and kind of agendas of a creature that cannot emote. So I don't know, this is kind of interesting challenge. So actually now what I'm doing, that's basically where the focus of the whole drawing session would be. I am drawing this card, and I will be also drawing this card in the fourth panel in the bottom of the page. To me, it is very important to have your background really, really high quality. This is why I always, I have a bunch of videos on this YouTube channel about backgrounds and whatnot. And I really care about background work, because I feel like there is a lot of times when people are slacking on background for their comics, and I think it's a missed opportunity, because backgrounds really, they do a lot of work. They do a lot of heavy liftings of the world building, and they can tell a lot about the world the characters inhabit, about traditions, and I really pay huge attention to my backgrounds. And I do pay a lot of attention to the details that I have on these backgrounds, like this card. I keep thinking, how does this card work? What does this card do? How those wheels are connected? What are they loading on this card? Okay, so they were traveling using this card. There was like a bunch of different bags and crap in this card, and then now that nobody is actually traveling, this card is just probably holding some items. So I decided to draw a saddle hanging out on this card. So probably people just took the gear and tack from their horses and just put it on in those cards. So it's just like thinking where things went, and think about what happened when I was not following, like showing the story necessarily. So what was happening. And I always feel like I want to really take my time and draw my backgrounds really high quality and really put a lot of thoughts into it. And yeah, this is kind of like something that I really love doing. So now you know what time it is. It's the time to draw grass, and I know it's not the most entertaining part of what I'm doing with my comic, but this is like, especially when we have a lot of environments, grass is something that you gotta keep drawing, and you gotta do it well. And even though it seems to be like just very repetitive things, it's not about just drawing grass strokes. When you're drawing a surface, this is this big, something like a patch of land, like something that I'm drawing right now, you have to think about a couple grammar, drawing grammar things, and you know how big I am on drawing grammar things, very traditional here, is that you have to keep thinking about atmosphere. You have to keep thinking about what is close to the camera, like a visionary camera, to the reader, and what is not. It's just, if you just go and draw the grass that looks very 2D, kind of like texture put behind, it's first not gonna be looking good, and it's not gonna be looking interesting. With something just basic as, for example, the grass, you can achieve a lot. If you go and look at, for example, reference pictures of a field, or a field with a fog, I always recommend, when you're creating your environments, look at the environments that have fog, because this is kind of something that we try to create when we're painting, basically, just because atmosphere is something that we try to capture. And atmosphere, what it basically means, is the idea that the air itself is not transparent. Is the idea that the air has its own kind of color. Think about it like water, but more transparent. So if you're underwater, if you like swimming underwater, you look at your hand, and your hand is very close to you. Your hand really looks really clear, it looks beigey. But for example, if you have a friend diving with you or swimming with you, you look at them and they look kind of all blue, they kind of look, and their skin doesn't look beige anymore, even though they might be just 2 meters away, and they don't look as clear anymore. They kind of have this almost like overlay a layer of some blueness. So basically that happens because the water, the way light goes through it, it's not like transparent. It has this hue in it, and like it has other maybe debris and other stuff in it. So the more volume of water you have between you and the object, the more of this color build-up is happening. So the farther objects away from you, the more it's going to fade into this blueness of the water, and at certain distance the object will completely disappear, hiding behind the density of this water. This is kind of the same that we're doing when we're creating atmosphere in our drawing. And this is not, that's something that artists discovered, I want to say in 18th, I want to say in like Romanticist era, but I'm not actually sure. I probably definitely snoozed that lecture in my university. But basically it's actually was innovation at a time when the artists realized that this is something that is happening. Because imagine like you're drawing from nature and you're just standing there, you have your paintings and you're looking outside. For example, you're drawing a landscape and you draw what you see. But it takes some realization and some observation to realize what is contributing to what you see. And so basically with air, how it works, air also imagine that it has certain color in it. And the more distance between you and other object, the more of this color would be implemented. So the more like the density of the air, the thicker layer of the air between you and the objects, the more this color of the air will come through. So that's why you can really see it when you look at the reference that have, for example, fog, because you can think about it as like a diluted fog. The farther things go from you, the more they kind of start disappearing in the fog, and the more they take on colors and colors of the fog. So this is in a nutshell kind of like atmosphere, and it's really, really, really important. And when you're drawing something like this, something that like anything nature related, think about atmosphere. Like for example, now why I'm talking about all of this. So for example, now I'm drawing the grass, and you might argue, well, duh, just drawing the grass, just draw little grasslings, and there's more. There's a lot of that goes into drawing grasslings, but you have to keep in mind that those kind of little bumps on the ground where the grass are, where the grass is a little bit, where the grasslings are, and where kind of like the overall bumpy clumps of them are, as they go away in the distance, away from you, like away from the reader, they will start having atmosphere build up. As you can see, it's slight, but it's still there. As it goes far, you can see like a little bit of a gray tones, a little bit of a muted tones. So you can see how object kind of get a little bit washed out with like this thickness of the air, the distance, like the volume of the air builds up, and it kind of goes in almost a foggy way. That's why I really like all the references that have fog in it, because this is where you can visually see like extreme version of it and then do a more subtle version of it. Also, all of this helps us to understand the distance and the richness. And this is something that I realized that I have to work a lot on, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, is that I realized, okay, I know how to grow grass, I know how to draw sky, I know how to draw hills, I know how to draw different things and different objects. But I realized that when it comes to create complete compositions, what I'm lacking is complexity, and complexity in a lot of details. Like, look at you see glimpses of the reference that I'm using, and in those references, what you can immediately notice is that how many details nature has, how much, like, just simple grass has so much variation, so much detail, so much complexity. It has grass completely different color, green, brown, light green, dark green. It has dirt going through, it has rocks going through, some grass is fallen, some grass is standing, some grass is new and just starting to grow, and some was already dead and rotting. So there's so much detail and complexity, and it takes you really looking at the references too, because it's not something that you necessarily can say, oh, I don't have imagination to think about all of this. It's not necessarily about your imagination. It's really about looking at the reference and realizing how complex and detailed the nature is. And I know that this is something that there was a moment when I realized, oh my God, there's so much complexity that I have to keep in mind and keep looking at the reference to realize it's not just like a green area with a lot of grasslings and that's it. There is so much complexity in just this area of grass. And there's something that I still can be working on and adding nuance and adding details. And it's something I'm still learning. But currently now it's also at like a time constraint. There's certain things that I can afford and cannot afford to do time-wise when I'm creating my pages. But yeah, this is something to keep in mind. And as you're drawing grass, you can see that why it may be potentially taking so much time. So it's not just me drawing grasslings. You see, I'm kind of creating certain patterns that the grass may have. So for example, here it's a clump. Here you can see like it's a dent in the grass. Here you can see there's some uneven different clumps. Here you can see that the ground is going down a little bit. Like for example, now I'm like what I'm drawing, the ground in the left side of this panel is actually lit by the setting sun. So the sun is, according to this panel, is setting on the left. So this is where the light is coming from. And also the ground is kind of has hill that is going down. In the further pages, you will see the character is going to be walking like towards left of the frame here. And they will be going down the hill. So the fact that I'm lighting up those this grass here with like orangey tones, it already communicates something to the reader. For example, there is a slope down there and the sun is down there, and I keep thinking how the ground behaves, how the grass behaves on the ground, and in which areas how it behaves. I also keep thinking, okay, there is a cart, and the cart probably was rolled here by like heady rods, kind of horses, creatures, and so there are gonna be tracks that distorted the grass. Then people were probably walking around it, so there's probably the grass being walked on, and so there's like a darker area next to the car that I keep thinking. So there should be also shadows, obviously, from the cart underneath the cart on the grass, and it doesn't have to be. It won't be really super not like symmetrical, but uniformal, just because the grass is not the result of different grasslings. It's just not uniformal. The grass, the earth texture has those ebb and flow, those hills and cavities, not like cavities, like dents, I don't know. So as you can see, as I'm drawing something as simple as grass, I'm putting a lot of thoughts on adding a lot of variation and a lot of complexity, and still my grass is nowhere close as this tiny patch of grass on my reference. You can see how my reference, it's just a tiny patch of grass in the reference. It's not even the whole picture, but this tiny patch is already so complex. And I'm literally using just this tiny patch to draw my whole panel. This is how complex nature in reality really is. And that's why I will be always, recommending you using references, always, just because references not only will show you how to draw things right, they always give you idea of variation that can be. And this is something, I know this was a very important moment for me to realize that variation is so important, but also it still teaches me about what types of variation can be in simple things and how to make things more complex and more realistic. And I still think that I'm not at all on a good level still here. Like, I'm in a good level in a way that when I draw grass, it does look like grass. It does look it goes into perspective. It does look like that goes into atmosphere. It does have all this complexity, but it doesn't have the complexity enough. So this nature doesn't look super wild. Like the nature that I'm drawing still looks very tamed. And maybe it's okay just because there's a lot of people living here. Maybe it's okay because there is also this type of grass that is not super tall. So this is like a northern area, so the grass is not crazy out of hands. So maybe that's okay, but I still know there's so much complexity I can do with environments, and that I'm not doing yet. And it's like something that I have to figure out how to work around, because like the moment you start going into a lot of complexity with the environment, what happens, like it's obvious, it takes time. And this is kind of the battle that I always have. What do? Do I choose to draw things really well, or do I choose to spend a lot of time with my comic and actually keep creating pages and keep moving the plot forward? And I always choose moving the plot forward, just because in the end of the day, this is what will make my comic like real, like finished, completed, existing. Because if I'm just have like 2 or 3 very beautiful panels, but I don't have a chapter to show for them, I'd say it's a big fail. So this is kind of like, I always, as I'm drawing, I always think about ways to improve. I'm always thinking about what can be my next step and where I can take the quality of my comic next. So this is something that I really, really deeply care about. And in no way I'm ever thinking, okay, I got it nailed down. And even though I really want to have like a style consistency and make sure I have everything nailed down style-wise for my comic, that it's consistent looking. And this is kind of like the reason why I was redrawing my whole chapter. Like I was redrawing chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 about the consistency. Actually thinking, like, I have a video when I was talking about it, kind of how I was doing this. But I'm thinking I'm gonna have like maybe the whole podcast episode very long when I would explain how it's working, because I think it's visual. You gotta show the visuals. Like I recorded one of the video and I explain it further, but it's just boring as hell. You're gonna need to see the visuals. But even though consistency is very important for me and I really care about consistency, I think it's natural. Like obviously it's natural for the comic visuals to get better and better as the story goes. And as I'm drawing, I always have some things in mind that I want to improve. So for example, one of them is me really adding more richness to backgrounds and more richness to the nature, and I think I'm gonna start trying it with the next chapter that I'm gonna be drawing. So as you can see, it's chapter 8, page 29. I think the chapter itself has maybe 50 pages. I actually don't remember from the top of my mind, but I think it's around like maybe 48 or 50. So I have not as much pages left at this point, so I'm now over the half. So, and I already have chapter 9 outlined, and you guys saw me doing it in the previous episodes. But basically, as you can see, like probably as you remember for a previous podcast, that chapter 9, first of all, like first part of it, first scene takes place still in nature, but this is nature that we've seen before, so I cannot do a lot of creativities there. I have to keep it consistent because it's a location we've been to already. But next part of the chapter, when I'm in Sakai's POV and when I'm drawing this, she's traveling through this forest and then she's traveling through these mountains, and I really want to make this area look pretty rich and has a lot of growth, like, you know, foliage, like a lot of grass, a lot of growing things in there. And this is where I probably gonna try to implement this new thing where I'm trying to make the environment more rich. And also I want to create, this is another thing, like when I want to create environment more rich, obviously I have references and I'm going to be drawing on them, but also I'm like one of those person who overthinks a lot. I like to think about my world, and if I'm drawing a tree, I like to think, well, what type of a tree it is. Is it like a human type of tree that we have in our world as well, or it's only happens on Silana? What type of tree is it? And I like to think about this because I like to, for example, if I'm drawing this tree, I want this tree to repeat later. And I like to, even as I'm drawing, because as you can see, sometimes it's getting really intimate. You spend a lot of time just drawing grass, and you have a lot of opportunity to think about that grass. So if the same, for example, with a tree, I like to create tree that has specific to Silana, for example, it has its own history. I like thinking, oh, this is how people see this tree. This is maybe the thought that people put in this tree. You know, the small cultural things that we have everywhere. For example, in Canada, maple. You know, very great example of a tree that has a lot of meaning. But it doesn't even have to be maple. It's can be a lot of other trees that, for example, if you think apple tree. So when we think apple tree, we immediately have the story, for example, that we remember immediately is that how Newton came up with all his gravity theory as he saw an apple falling down the tree or on his head, or I don't know how the story goes. So basically, you can see how a lot of small elements, how they work with the world, and this is small things where the very important and powerful world building can take place. So as I'm drawing something like this, I like to think about it. And if I have something that I implemented, I like to have some character say something about it. Or, for example, to make this tree or something like this appear again. And I don't like just drawing whatever, just thinking, oh, well, that's just a forest, so it has some foresty things. And I like to think all the stuff very deep, and, you know, you can argue that might be overthinking, but at the same time, you see how much time I'm spending just drawing this grass. So you can definitely see how it is, you spend a lot of the time with your drawing. And I overall with comics, I'm pretty sure it takes, like, especially the comic that I'm doing, it takes more time to produce the comic than a book. And not talking a complexity of the media, which is easy or not, but just to tell what I'm telling with one page of the comic, it takes way less time within doing a book. Even with revision and whatnot, you probably spend, I don't know, couple of hours to, okay, 12 hours, I think it's pretty, but say it's like couple of hours to create a page of the book. But for the comic, it will equal several pages of the comic to say the same thing that the page of the book does. And to create a page of the comic takes, I would argue, way more time than to create and write the page of the book. So I think with comics, especially something like mine, that a fantasy that is very long story with expensive world and whatnot, I spend a lot of time just drawing. And I spend more time drawing than actually writing and coming up with the plot. That's why I can definitely afford myself a luxury of thinking about things and, you know, considering them, because I think that whatever can add complexity is very important. Basically, I really like thinking about all of those things, because complexity, that is something that, in my opinion, creates richness and kind of like a reread value. Because to me, this is how I want to personally write stories. I want to make sure they have this reread value. So you read them once and it's not just one-time thing. You really want to return and investigate all the details and really see everything, like just be immersed into the world, where the plot basically is not the most driving element. So that's just my personal preference. So that's why, for example, now that I'm drawing this card, I'm drawing those saddles and I'm paying attention to which saddle it is. Like the black saddle is from the dark horse, like the guy in red, basically, with a ponytail, like the old lady ponytails, all of them. The one that has like shaved temples. But the black is from his horse that we see from the beginning of chapter 8, and then the brown one is Croy's saddle, is from his horse. Again, I should start calling and using my terminology, because I feel like I'm feeling like, no, I can't just be calling something like it's actually called in my comic. But this podcast is about my comic, so I might as well. So basically, it's from Kuroi's Heterot. So I just like to think about this. Where did things go? Where they put things? Like, I like keeping in mind how many items each character has in their pocket, in their bag. What do they own? So it's like all of this. It's not like, oh, they own this special thing that would be so sad when they, die or something else happens, they disappear. It will be such a sentimental thing. Not like that. Just actually how many objects do they have? Where did objects go? And all of that. So now I finally finished this panel and I'm gonna clean the lines. So sometimes when background is this complex, like for example this one, so not the one that I can pre-draw, prior to working on the scene. This is basically how I do it. I do it exactly page-to-page basis, and I try still to reuse it. Like, for example, in this case, I will reuse it for panel down below, the panel number 4, because I always like to make sure I'm reusing as much as possible. That's why I have better quality and less time spent. So in this case, this is how I approach. I just remove, disable all the layers with lines and with the colors for the characters, and I just draw each panel as its own background, and then I put characters on top, and then I draw characters, and then I make the characters interact with the background. I kind of paint on top the interaction between characters and the background, like the shadows that they're casting and whatnot, all those fun things. So to me, I really also like why I divide it still when it's panel to panel basis. It's because I just don't want to be distracted from drawing the background. I feel like, especially in this panel, imagine, so we have a card, we have 2 saddles in the card, we have those bags in the card, we have all this grass, and then we have 4 people, 2 pigeons, and I just feel like if I'm not dividing, like a divide and conquer, it will become very confusing, and I have to also keep in mind a lot of edges that I'm working. So every time a character interacts with another character or character interacts with the environment, there is an edge, and like, I don't know, it just feel like the more different objects interact with each other, the more I have to pay attention to this cleanness of the edges. And normally when I'm just drawing a painting that is just not comic, I don't care. I draw background and characters together. But when it's a comic, I just like to draw as separate as possible, and then I just can cut out, move around, and do all the stuff. So now you see me adjusting perspective for this card. So I just copy pasted it, and I just mirrored it. So you can see that now all the saddles are in the wrong position. But since the card itself is pretty symmetrical, that's fine. So now I can work around to just make perspective work better, and then to make saddles, you know, be placed in the correct placements. So I like do sheets like this a lot. I have a video about reuse. I will link it somewhere if I can remember it. I will link it somewhere. But to me, reuse and is really great tool. Just don't reuse in the way that is boring, but try to salvage. If you're using something, like if you're drawing something similar in the very next panel, try to salvage that you already drew. Try to use it as much as possible, and of course use your best judgment to, you know, alter it, adjust it to make sure it's not like repetitive and it blends with a different angle. Like here you saw me, I was kind of moving around this card and making sure it works. And yeah, and also what I'm doing, like because I drew so much grass and I put so much work in this grass already, I'm just using the very same grass to patch and create this kind of like a mass of grass. And then I'm gonna be erasing, and the way I'm erasing, I'm not just, you know, copying side and just keeping the whole side just the copy of another one. I am actually drawing on top. And the way I'm erasing, it still has thought in it. It's still thought through, and but also I'm at the same time salvaging. So you know, we kind of saw how much time grass actually takes. That's why if I already created a grass for a certain panel, I'm gonna be reusing this in this scene as much as possible. And I have I think in the next podcast I'm gonna show you how I'm using like reusing a very big patch of grass. That is also like when the camera is looking a little bit down and we see quite a lot. But that's very important, I think, because this is kind of what you see, what is happening in big productions. Like for example, in cartoons, they're reusing animation a lot, if it's a serialized program. So the same thing we do in visual effects industry. If we have shots that are from the same sequence, we try to create a master shot and cover in the shot everything that we will be needing in the sequence, and then reuse as much as possible for other individual shots. It's just like you wanna do it. But that's why I personally like separating my process of creating lines and the process of me painting. I like to have just a pretty big separation between them, time-wise and mindset-wise. That's why when I'm creating lines, I'm not at this level thinking, oh, I'm just gonna reuse that and then I'm gonna just reuse that, because that's bad mentality to have when you're creating lines and when you're just outlining what is happening on the in the chapter, on the page, in the scene. You want to think what is the best for the scene and what is the best for the moment, how to represent things the best way. You don't want to be thinking at this moment how to cheat, basically. You want to think it in next stage when you're painting, because there when you cheat, it will be still within the framework that you already created while creating lines. So the page will still flow right, the chapter will still flow right, and the scene will just flow right. But so we are cheating within that area, something like I'm doing now with grass. And it's really something that saves me a lot of time. And yeah, as I said in the video about reuse, I'm talking about it a lot just because I want to make sure you guys not just going and just copying, pasting and just using it like that. But yeah, as you can see, that's kind of what I'm doing it again. I'm just grabbing the grass from completely different page whatsoever. But I like to grab this grass just because remember what I said earlier about atmosphere. Since I copied the grass, I realized, okay, that right corner of this panel is really farther even from us than what I had in the grass from the first panel. So I need to draw atmosphere way stronger in that area of the panel. And then I realized, wait a second, I already spent like a lot of time drawing that grass. And actually, I think it was on the second podcast, I believe. So I realized I'm just gonna grab it from there. So this is kinda, I'm really promoting smart reuse. And if you already put a lot of work into something, just reuse it. Just make sure you reuse this work. Also, what I like doing is if I need to draw something really fast, again, as I said, I'd rather cut something out that make sure about the edges. So here I really need to draw this shadow and all this grass around the card. So you can see how when I'm drawing the shadow underneath the card, I kind of just don't care about the edges between the card and the grass. I just go ahead and make sure, because if I were like to draw this and to draw all the strokes that I wanted to do and I would really pay attention to the edge, it will take me way more time. It just takes less time to just not care about it and just paint as the way I need to paint it. And then, well, because I'm creating it on a separate layer, and then just mask this out, just erase, you know, what I want, like those edges. It takes way less time and give me all the freedom to create the flow of the shadow and the flow of the grass underneath the card. So, like, again, every time, so this is kind of how I constantly try to balance the quality with the time spent, because I want my comic to be drawn as well as possible. I really want to push what comics can do visually, and even though like I'm just the one person doing the comic, and I'm not like very ambitious, I guess. It's more like I really like the challenge, and I feel it can be done even better. Comics can look even better, even stronger, even has even more details. But at the same time, I want to still be within a realistic time constraint. So for me, it's always like finding out those ways where I can save a little bit of time here and there, but at the same time improve the quality. Something like I can see like me cheating with the shadow. It might seem like not a big deal, but it's gonna save me some time. It's gonna maybe save me like 30 minutes, and 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, grabbing some grass from another page that I already drew, duplicating the grass, you know, mirroring the card, just grabbing the card basically from another panel. This all overall saves me so much time, and the quality stays great. But as you can see, I reuse quite a lot of elements from different areas of my drawing, and so that makes it, yeah, see, done. Very simple. And so because I'm reusing all these elements from different panels, from different pages that they have, and I'm reusing them with thought in mind, it's just not like I just want to be lazy and just whatever. I'm doing it with purpose, and I'm putting thought into it, and I'm not half-assing this. Because of this panel, it doesn't look like reuse at all. It just looks like something very consistent, like literally cameraman literally stood up, moves his camera and gear from another angle, and he's continuing filming in, I mean, actually this is not how film production works. Like they actually have different cameras set up anyway, and they're just playing the scene, and they have different, and they use different camera angles for, you know, just the make a cut. But basically it seems just consistent, and it doesn't strike you just a reuse. It doesn't look lazy. What it does look, it looks proper quality, and it looks like there is, yeah, there are a lot of work put on this page, and you know, its page is honestly made. You can see like the artist was like really trying and putting in work. But so that's how I recommend use and reuse. I highly recommend reuse, and I highly recommend using it. And also what I like doing when I'm reusing, I like to still go and just paint some things over. So, you know, some brush strokes do not look exactly the same. So sometimes I'm purposely, if I'm reusing something, I would copy it from one panel and paste it to another panel before the panel that I'm using is finished. So for example, the panel would be finished maybe 85–90%, and I will copy the element and paste it in another page or in another panel, and we'll finish it there. So, and I will finish 15% in one panel and 15% in another panel separately, even though they have like 80% the same reused base. And that's why it will create different brush strokes on top that will create this variation and make them look like not complete reuse. So yeah, this is kind of what I like doing. And yeah, as you can see, I have to correct those saddles and make them rotated correctly. You know, the funny thing that happens a lot of the time, I mean all the time, when I'm creating a page, I flip it horizontally just to make sure all my characters' faces are not looking crazy, because you kind of need to flip your canvas horizontally because we have this bias vibe when we're drawing faces. They look right to us, but sometimes we need to flip it to make sure stuff is symmetrical or more or less symmetrical. And yeah, that's what I like doing. I like to draw, for example, one way and then I flip horizontal. I draw sometime that way, then I flip horizontal again. I do a lot of back and forth, so it looks right to me all the time. So, but sometimes what happens, it's kind of like what I'm doing now, not because I'm flipping horizontally, because I'm actually literally flipping this card, but sometimes I would draw, and for consistency reasons, I would do something on the wrong side because I forget that I'm not on the master side. Well, actually here also I remembered as I was drawing, I realized, wait a second, on one panel there were this straps, and I have to draw these straps here, and then I draw straps on the first panel, and then as you can see on the page 828 I drew those straps also. Yeah, so just to make sure consistency is there. And sometimes if I know something is not consistent, I have a document. So if you see, so I have this app called Agenda, and on this Agenda app I like to have all of my pages that I'm currently working on. I have like the list of them, and then when one page is done I put done next to it, and then I also have lists of like pages finished in February, pages finished in March, pages finished in, I don't know, January. I do it because to see how many pages I completed in any given month, to just understand my speed. By the way, in February I did not, I just finished 2 pages, but it's because you see me draw, guys, you see me draw, you know I was not lazy. It's just because I was actually outlining chapter 9. It was a lot of time. So, and that's when something is inconsistent, I realize, oh, I need to check if I have this pigeon in the right place throughout the whole scene. Or for example, with the straps, I noticed that I have those straps, I forgot them on page 829, and then I realized I forgot them on 828. And then usually what I would do with those things, I would go and in this Agenda app, I would just put in front of, like when I have this list of pages for the whole chapter, I would put check this, check the pigeon, checks. The thing I always forget is like straps on Tsukai's hoodie. Like, I don't know, I decided to add the straps on the hoodie and I hate drawing them every time, and every time I forget to do them. It's a thing. So I have to do check this, check the pigeon, check the tattoos on this person, check, you know, that stuff, like straps here. And so this is kind of what I like putting. And then after I think I'm finished with the scene, I just go and double check. Well, actually I do double check it not when the scene is over, but when the chapter is over, because until the chapter is over I'm like on this mad dash. I have to like keep going, next page. So yeah, kind of this is what's happening. And now the work is full on the characters, and yeah, that's I don't know, drawing clothes are somehow so relaxing. I remember when I was just starting, maybe starting with maybe with chapter 4, when I started full on drawing, like this is where the characters, like Tsukai was full on in this fantasy world in Silana. This is where I started full on drawing this fantasy clothes, and every time it's kind of like a new clothes, like chapter 4, I would be feeling a little bit challenged with all the folds and whatnot. But now, after I drew so many times, several times, I'm feeling so relaxed drawing them. And I remember when I was in art school, this was something that I really I was scared the most to draw folds. I think we started drawing them maybe in the 4th year out of maybe 3rd year, like half 3rd year, maybe 4th year out of 5. And this is like, I was the most intimidating of drawing clothes. I was like, how does it work? I don't understand how folds work. I don't understand, like when we had like our first task, when we had an actually like clothes just draped over something, and this was our first time drawing this. I was like, it's gonna be so profound. They're gonna tell us the big deep secret of drawing the clothes, of drawing the folds in the clothes. I was like, oh, that's it. I will understand. They finally will tell me. And you know what? There's no secret. It's just the same thing as drawing literally everything else. And it's about shadow and light and how you do that. Just thinking. So if, for example, you guys are struggling with shape, think about it. Face, clothes, those folds, hair, anything that you ever want to draw. It's as simple as just thinking shape, literally. How the shape develops in space. Where does which part of the shape go? And this is literally the only thing you need to know about the shape itself. And then to emphasize the shape, how does the light work with the shape? Where does the light fall? And where does the shape cast shadows on itself or on the surfaces it interacts with? And this is something that is very valuable that I learned in art school, is that don't be intimidated by what you're drawing. Because what you're drawing, like details like face, hand, I don't know, unicorn, well, heady rods in my case, in my story, never be intimidated. Don't name those things even. It's all shape. And I remember the first time, like when I was applying for my university, you have an entry exams, and those entry exams are all about, you have to draw this clay head, and I was intimidated. I'm like, how I'm possibly gonna draw this clay head and make it look like this guy's head? And again, in the end, it's all just copy the shape. Look at the shape, study the shape, and create the shape. Don't be intimidated by like eyes, nose, everything. It's all about the shape. So this is kind of something that I think can be valuable for you. Don't be intimidated by what it is, folds or not folds, and it's all doesn't matter. It's all shape. And in this case, I'm drawing the shape of this guy's body, and it's actually a little bit challenging angle because we're looking a little bit up from him, but at the same time he is in this a little bit more complicated pose when he's like leaning back a little bit and then he's standing up. So it's so usually in poses like this, to help myself out, I like to really emphasize the anatomy. As you can see, I'm really leaning in the way the muscle work in the leg, because that's kind of helps me understand where the leg is positioned in space in relationships to the camera. And I actually don't even, I would still keep those like emphasized anatomy in to first of all help myself to draw it and help the reader to understand where everything is. In real life, I think anatomy will not be as pronounced and as defined, but sometimes when you're drawing, this is another thing that is important. You have to make sure the way you draw is not really just about copying, it's about making it clear what you're drawing and how you're drawing and where is what. That's why when using references, you use them, but you're not copying them completely, because it just will not work. It will be less coherent unless you can draw exactly like photography, just rendering. Your drawing will not be able to be as coherent as photography. You have to implement those things like we talked about today, just breaking down the shape, understanding how shape works, and stuff like atmosphere, all this stuff that artists know. Yeah, see, I'm flipping the canvas horizontal to check, because something like, especially if it's a challenging pose, it's very important to do. Yeah, see, I flipped. I'm like, I don't know. I think, yeah, we need to adjust him a little bit, put him a little bit here. And yeah, so that's very important. Flip your canvas horizontal, you guys. It's extremely important. And yeah, because I cut it out, I need to just, you know, mask out the edges that I grabbed with them. But yeah, so we touched on a lot of you know, artistic kind of like grammar topics today, and I'm thinking eventually to create a video when I will go through all of them, kind of create almost like a course, but I kind of would like my channel to grow a little bit for now, and by then, because I also want to get more feedback from you guys, and for this I need more of you guys to get feedback and to see what you guys really want to know, what you're struggling the most, so I can tailor it for you, kind of like understand what is going on. So for now, I'm just, you know, putting on content, making sure my channel grows, and you know, it's not like something I can do consciously, just make sure the the channel grows. What I can do is just, yeah, put on content, make it consistent, and, you know, make sure I'm doing my part in creating good content, and hopefully people will come. And when there will be enough of people and I will get enough of the feedback and understand what is going on, I will start creating more of the videos of when I'm actually teaching more, but I need to kind of understand who is kind of watching my videos and what their background, what they know, what they want to realize, so I can structure it better, because otherwise I have to start from the very beginning. But it's just weird, because if you're starting from the very beginning, like it takes years to learn drawing, I cannot just start from that of the beginning, so I need to know what gaps I have. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. That's it for this very long weekend podcast. I don't know how long will be the next one coming up, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one. Thank you for watching, guys. Bye.